Hey everybody, Nicole here from Hair of the Dog, and welcome back to the Hair of the Dog podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be talking all about some gear, specifically DSLR versus mirrorless, where's the industry going, and we are talking tech with none other than my favorite tech talker, Charlotte Reeves from Brisbane, Australia. And if you like photographing dogs, which you probably do if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to love this episode. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, Nicole here from Hair of the Dog, and welcome back to the Hair of the Dog podcast. I have a special treat from down under for you guys. My good friend Charlotte Reeves is here on the podcast to talk about camera stuff. Charlotte, hi.
Hi, Nicole. How are you doing? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. The mirrorless cameras have changed the game really in the photography space. And it's like, we need to make a podcast about that. And there is no one that I can think of better to have on to talk about like camera tech stuff than you, my friend.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you thought of me because I love that stuff. I love diving into all that tech awesomeness.
I love it. Yeah, I love diving into it with you because I love it, but I am not super techie per se, other than then I learn things from you. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. um, so oh my gosh, how many years has it been? Because you and I are both Canon shooters.
Yep.
And has it been 2 years that we jumped to the R5?
Yeah, so I think it came out right in the middle of the pandemic, didn't it? So was that 2020? Is that like 2.5 years? I think it's
I
two and
don't
a
know
half
what
years.
all these years run
I
together. I feel like
know.
2021 and even 2022 to an extent didn't really
Yep.
exist.
Yep. I know.
It
It just
was
all
just
ran
like
into one
boom.
year. Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
pretty sure
crazy.
it was in 2020. I think it was July 2020. So I pre-ordered
Yeah.
mine as soon as I found it was coming out, and as soon as it was available to pre-order, I pre-ordered mine. And I think I was probably one of the first people to get it in Australia, at least.
Yeah, you
Um,
were. Yeah. What caused you, if you can think back to then, to
mm.
be so excited about the R5 that you pre-ordered it?
I just really wanted to switch to mirrorless because I just love, well, I don't know, I'm a geek and I love new equipment and gear. And I also sort of identified that it was perhaps where things were moving towards because other
Mhm.
manufacturers had already started bringing out, professional mirrorless cameras. And I felt that Canon was a little bit behind with that. It had a couple of models, I think the R and the RP, but it didn't have anything
Right.
professional. Whereas Sony in particular was bringing out a lot of mirrorless stuff. And I thought
Yeah.
it was only going to be a matter of time before Canon caught up. And when they caught up, they were going to do it really well. And that was, I guess, my faith in Canon as a brand. uh, so that's kind of why I decided that as soon as a decent sounding one was going to come out, then I was definitely jumping on it. Just so excited about the possibilities of a smaller body, of the being able to see exactly what you're shooting through the viewfinder, also different lenses as well. I was quite
Yeah.
excited about because especially the 50mm lens, because I love the focal length. I love 50mm on full frame as a focal length. And I've had all the Canon EF 50mm, so the 1.8, the 1.4, and the 1.2, and I hate all of them for
Do
various
you really?
reasons.
You
Yeah.
hated the EF ones?
Yeah, well, I mean, the 1.8 is just a nifty 50, right? The
Yeah.
1.4 is okay. It's a bit of a workhorse, but it does have some pretty bad chromatic aberration, and the image quality isn't that great. The 1.2, I mean, that's meant to be the holy grail of 50s, right?
Right.
But I always felt that the image quality wasn't there, and also again really bad chromatic aberration. And
Yeah.
I just was dying for Canon to bring out a new 50, and I'm like, right, well, if I go down the mirrorless road, then surely they'll bring out an amazing 50 for the mirrorless, and they did, and I have it, and it's awesome.
I remember too when you switched. You were like, I'm so excited because I'm just going to have two lenses, Charlotte Reeves. You said you're going to have two lenses, and that is it. No more. You're 70 to 200. And I think it was in a 28 to 70, 24 to 70, the one that
The
you just, I think, sold.
The 20 yeah, the one that I just sold. So yeah, the 28 well, I actually did plan to have 3. So I always planned to have the new 50, but I thought I
Okay.
would
Okay.
be
Fair
okay
enough.
with the 70 to 200 and then like a wide to medium zoom, and I went for the 28 to 70 because it was f2. And I really did love that lens. I really did, but I have just recently sold it. And the main reason is because of the weight. So the
Hmm.
weight doesn't bother me too much. I don't have any problems holding the camera or anything normally. But when you're using that lens, you're working up quite closely with the dog generally because it's a wider angle. And you often have one hand holding the camera and the other hand doing all the other things that dog photographers do. So, using
Right.
squeakers, using treats, rewarding the dog, getting their attention. And I just found that holding the camera with that lens on it with one hand was just too much, and I just found I wasn't using it as much, which is a shame because
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It is the most beautiful zoom lens I've ever used, and that's
Wow.
also
That says
including
a
the 7.
lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's also including the RF 70 to 200, which is a great lens too. But the image quality, the depth of field, everything that 28 to 70 is just incredible. I just wish it wasn't so heavy. That's
Right.
the
What was the
problem.
f-stop? It's like an f2. Isn't it an f2?
F2, yeah, yep. So being able
Yeah.
to shoot at F2 at 28 and also 70 is just it's
Hmm.
crazy what a difference that slight change makes, in the available
Yeah.
f-stop. Just you can just get so much more light in there, and it really changes the look of the image too. So, um, yeah, it's a shame that one didn't work out.
That's all right. We have some other amazing ones going down the rabbit hole. Right before we started here, you and I both said that we just put in our order for our 135 1.8.
Yep. Yep, how exciting is
What?
that? So cool. So I used to have the EF 135 f2, and that was also one of
Uh-huh.
my favorite lenses. That and the 35. I have a lot of favorite lenses, to be honest. But
I know. You're 35. I blame you for me having to buy the 35 because I tried that at one of the Barcas. I'm like, let me just play with this. And then I
yeah,
was like, okay, I'm gonna order that.
yeah, that's famous last words, isn't it? Like, oh, I'll just here have a
Uh-huh.
go with this one. Oh, okay, I'll just have a
Yeah.
play with it. Uh-oh. I mean, that's why I bought a Canon 1DX back in the day because I tried someone's 1DX and I was like, oh gosh, I can never go back now. I've tasted exactly how amazing this is. There's no way I can go back. So yeah, I can understand how that happened.
This
Happens
is
so easily.
dangerous. Maybe we just both need to find friends that shoot other systems so we don't like just test each other's lenses.
I know. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Yeah. I'm so excited about this 135 f1.8 though, because it's an RF lens, and Canon are putting all the development into the RF lenses these days. I
Hmm.
don't think I don't think they're going to be bringing out any new EF lenses.
No, I believe they stopped all development of EF lenses. Yeah, that's what I've heard. So they're the writing on the wall. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons I jumped over to mirrorless too, which I waited for your review. And then I was like, all right, if it's 2 thumbs up from Charlotte, then
I'm
that's
the
good
test
enough for me.
subject.
You were. And I could see that writing on the wall because, Fuji and Sony have been putting so much into mirrorless, but it felt like Nikon and Canon were kind of like just stagnant there, that they weren't really, but I think they were
Lagging.
doing so much behind the scenes before they released it. And then when they did, I mean, the R5, the R6 are incredible. And, Nikon has their new mirrorless. Is it the Z9, I think?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that is just they're incredible, incredible cameras. And, you know, you can see that that's where that's going, especially when Canon then announces that they're not going to be developing any more EF lenses, and it's just kind of time to go with the go with the change with this
Yeah,
new system. But
exactly.
before we talk more about that, let's just talk a little bit. Do you want to speak to just kind of what the difference between our old trusty DSLRs versus the new mirrorless machines that we have.
Yeah, sure. So DSLR actually stands for digital single lens reflex camera. So basically, what they have in them to allow you to see through the lens to see what the camera is going to capture, they have a mirror system. And so that is a little mirror that then directs the image up through a prism, and so you can see it when you look through the viewfinder. So the biggest difference really is that mirrorless cameras do not have the mirror. They're mirrorless, which kind of
Mhm.
makes sense, really. So instead of having that, the image goes straight through onto the sensor. And when you look through the viewfinder, you're actually seeing what the sensor sees. So it's
Mhm.
much more direct. And because you don't have this clunky kind of mirror system with the prism inside the cameras can be a lot more compact, they can be smaller. And in addition to that, you also have some other great things as well. So as when you're looking through the viewfinder on a mirrored camera, so a DSLR, you are seeing a reflection of what's coming in through the lens. When you're looking through the viewfinder on, or even at the back of the camera on the rear LCD of a mirrorless camera, you're seeing exactly what is coming onto the sensor. And that's awesome because you can look through the viewfinder and you can actually see the exposure that the
Mhm.
sensor is going to get, which is absolutely amazing because whenever you're looking through the viewfinder of a DSLR camera, you're not actually sure whether the image is going to be under or overexposed. You have to refer to the light meter if you're shooting in manual, or you have to be shooting in an automatic exposure mode. You can't immediately see the exposure. So I found that is like one of probably the best things about a mirrorless camera is that being able to see exactly the exposure, and so being able to adjust it really quickly and easily, and so you can keep on shooting because I like many other professional photographers, pet photographers, shoot in manual exposure mode.
Mhm.
So that's been one
Yeah,
of
and to be able to see that feedback really quickly, I know I'm still in the habit just because old habits die hard. I mean, I shot for 10 years with a DSLR,
yeah,
where, I take a picture and it's like, oh, hit play, like to kind of chimp on the back and just make
yeah,
sure it still looks good. I'm like, all right, of course it does. It looks the same. Um, and I think that was one of the hardest, not hard, one of the, um, I don't even know what the proper adjective is. I guess my biggest unnerving thing of changing over is every time I would pull the viewfinder up to my eye, and sometimes it would be like the old picture was still in there for a second, and you'd be like, "Whoa!" And it like
yeah,
surprised me because
yeah.
I was so used to seeing just like through the mirror to like the live, just straight out into my
Exactly what is
camera.
in front of the lens. Yeah, exactly
Right,
what's there,
right.
and there's all these other things coming up instead. So, yeah,
Yeah, I was
that was
like, "Wait, what's that? Oh, okay. Shoo."
that was actually one of the first things that I changed because obviously you can set up the camera how you want it. So I actually made it
Right.
so that it wouldn't come up with the previous image in the viewfinder. So it wouldn't review the
Yeah,
image
yeah.
straight away. I found that a lot more intuitive. And I was actually
Right.
expecting there to be more of an adjustment sort of period with
Mhm.
the
Agreed.
differences in the viewfinder. And I found that actually wasn't because I think a previous, like if I'd have gone and been a total early adopter and gone with like a Canon R, so one of the very first Canon
Mhm.
mirrorless cameras, the I think there is more of a delay in when you're looking through
Yeah.
the viewfinder as to what's actually sort of happening. But by the time they got to the R5, I mean, I don't really notice any sort of delay. It's pretty
Agreed.
much instant.
I was just gonna say one of the biggest drawbacks I think of mirrorless cameras when they first came out was the delay.
Yep.
Like even from a delay of taking the photo and a
Mm.
delay of what you're seeing in the viewfinder, which working with pets, like we can't have a delay. It's just not
No.
negotiable.
Delay is not good for us. We need all the timing that we can get.
Yeah. Yeah, so I haven't noticed any delay, with the R5 either. I mean, the equipment truly the it was a really seamless, easy transition over other than, changing a couple settings here and there. I know
Yeah.
one of the biggest things is kind of getting used to battery life of that too, because I would say that's probably the biggest.
I was
Biggest
just gonna
drawback, you
mention
think, for
that.
mirrorless?
Yes, battery life is a big
Yeah.
thing. 'Cause I mean, you also like, we both of us shot with a Canon 1DX previously.
Yep.
So you have, basically a battery pack built into the bottom of the camera. That's
Right.
also what made that camera so bulky. So you have this big stonking battery in there that lasts for like 2 or 3 sessions. I mean, it would just last
Right.
forever. And then with the little compact R5, you're back to the little batteries again. The same, I think it's actually the same battery as you have with like a 5D. It's
It
the
is.
same type
Yeah,
of
because I
battery.
sold all my extra ones when I moved to the 1DX, and then, like, a year and a half later, I upgraded to the 5D. I'm like, "Don't!
Yeah,
Why
I
did
could
I
have
sell
done with
all those
those.
extra batteries?"
Yeah, yeah, true. And like those batteries in the old DSLRs weren't too bad, but the problem is you're now running two LCD screens in the new mirrorless cameras,
Mhm.
and that is why they chew through them so much. So the first thing I
Yeah.
did was buy multiple batteries, and to be honest, I think it's fine now. I have multiple batteries. I have a good charging system. I know which ones are charged and which ones aren't. I always
Mhm.
charge when I get home from a shoot. So it's been a little bit of an adjustment, but it's really not that big of a problem. And the trade off, I guess, the good thing is that it's so much lighter. The system, the camera is just so much
Mhm.
lighter to use. I mean, you don't have a massive battery in there, but you also don't have the bulk and the weight as well of a camera.
Right. And I'm trying to think, I don't think for a normal session, I don't think I've ever run out of battery. Like, one battery has gotten through all of my normal sessions. If there's something that I'm shooting, like, especially long or multiple sessions back to back, or if it's, like, really, really cold, which that's why I moved south. I don't really shoot in them very much anymore. Um,
And with the
but,
cold.
yeah, for normal sessions, I haven't run out of I have a spare, but I don't think I've ever had to use it for a normal session.
I don't think I
I've
have
also
either.
turned the back LCD screen off, so it's not on all the time unless I want it to be on. Like, it's so that
Yeah,
helps save some battery, I think.
you can definitely adjust it. So you can adjust all those power saving features. So you can have the LCD screens turn off within, 2 seconds or 5 seconds or 20 seconds. So if you are
Mhm.
finding that you're really chewing through battery, I mean, you can tweak things. That's what I love about this camera too.
Yeah.
It's so customizable. You can tweak all that
Mhm.
stuff. You can change your buttons around to activate different things on the camera. Actually, one of the things that I really love about it is the ability to do what is being touted as double back button focus, which is
Yeah.
really cool. So, I mean, oh gosh, there's a whole other, the animal eye autofocus.
I just wrote down, I'm like, "We need to talk about the focus,"
Yeah.
because it's amazing. I mean, the 1DX wasn't too shabby. It was a great camera, but
Mm.
then switching over to the R5, I was like, "Holy cow.
Yeah,
This
it's
this
just
is
an
like voodoo
absolute,
magic."
it's a game changer, complete and utter game
Mhm.
changer. And it's not just the R5, so it's not just the Canon. We've been very Canon centric here, but it's not just the
Yeah.
Canon. I mean, most manufacturers' new mirrorless cameras do have some version of animal detection, eye detection, face detection.
Mhm.
A lot of them even have things, vehicles, motorbikes, all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Birds. Even the new focusing system with the Canon R6 II actually has horses as well, which
Right, right,
we
right.
actually don't have. So that's one of the things I first tested with the Canon R5. Like, does it recognize the face of a horse? And while it recognized eyes, I think it looks for catch lights, so it found eyes. It didn't
Uh-huh.
really seem to be very good at detecting, okay, this is a horse head. So it would sort of default to focusing on the body, which isn't ideal really. But
Right.
most of these cameras all have this, and I guess that's the manufacturers listening to what people want, and
Right.
also
I mean, and
having.
the number of people photographing humans with their camera versus horses is definitely skewed much larger.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I think that, and the fact that it's all moving towards the software in the camera as well. So,
Mhm.
I mean, you can have all of the actual moving parts of the camera and the electronics of the camera, but then on top of that, you've got this software and firmware that you can
Mhm.
upgrade, and it's, machine learning and all of this stuff that is actually going to improve this stuff better and better as time goes on without actually even having to buy a new camera. So I think a lot of it
Yeah.
a lot of the time, all of these new features are just going to keep coming on top of what we already have.
Do you have any idea? Because like the old DSLRs would have like 100,000 clicks. Like it would have a certain like click rate until like the camera was like, oh, that camera's getting old.
Shutter count, yeah.
Yeah. But with the mirrorless, it doesn't have all those moving features. I'm wondering if it's like an electric car that would live longer.
I think so, yeah. I mean, less moving parts is less things to go wrong, less things to fail, to wear.
Right.
So because you don't actually have that mirror flipping up and down all the time, I mean, that's
Yeah.
one less moving part. You don't actually have a shutter count, really.
Right.
There's not really a shutter, it's electronic.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, technically they could possibly last longer and be less problematic as well, which is one of the
Right.
other things that's great. But yeah, going back to the autofocus because I'm talking about
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. Let's go
autofocus.
back to those because this is people are always super, interested in that and how to set it up and what the options are.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute game changer. I started using it as soon as I got the camera. I was like, right, enough with this single point focus and moving the focus point around to where I want it. I'm going to make this animal autofocus work well. So there's a few little tweaks on this in the settings that I've found that make it all work a lot better.
Uh
I
huh.
previously, and did you use back button focus as well? You used back button
Uh
focus,
huh.
didn't you?
I
Yeah,
did. I still do. I have mine
yeah.
set up a little bit different than yours. But yeah, go ahead, talk about yours, and I'll tell you how I still like to use mine.
Yeah, so I mean, there's not really without going too far into back button focus and its advantages and why you might want to use it. It's not as relevant with a modern mirrorless camera that has the animal detection. You don't really need to use it. But the thing that I love about this is the ability to use double back button focus. So it's having the AF on button or one button on the back of the camera set up to use animal autofocus, and then
Hmm.
the button right next to it, which on the R5 is the little asterisk button, having that set up to use a single point immediately as soon as
Yes.
you hit that button. Because while the animal autofocus is fantastic, sometimes in some situations it does fail. It doesn't work as well as it should.
Right.
Generally, that's in relation to low light, dark subjects.
Hmm.
I feel
You
it
found running through water too, because there'd be so much specular highlights that it was like, where the heck do I
exactly,
focus?
exactly. So it
Yeah.
looks for what I think it looks for is catch lights in eyes. And if you've got something else in the image that kind of look like catch lights, like specular highlights in water, full sun on
Uh
water,
huh.
it might get a little bit confused. And also in dark, dark conditions where you don't have big bright catch lights. And if you've got a dog that's like completely black with no areas of contrast on it, it can struggle a
Right.
little bit, especially if you're shooting action. I mean, it's
Ralph.
really just
If you're
piling.
if you're photographing Ralph.
Ralph, yeah. So Craig's dog, Ralph the Affin Pincher, which is pretty much the most difficult dog in the world to photograph.
The
He's
dog that
tall, he's
keep
hairy,
on
he's
taking
got
pictures like,
black eyes.
"Where are your eyes?"
Yeah, they're in there somewhere. Actually, I just visited Craig, and while I was over there, Ralph had a groom, and he came back from the groomer, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can see your little face, I can see your eyes. It's amazing." So he does
I
he does
love
have
it.
eyes. Newsflash. Anyway, so yeah, dogs where some dogs like where you just it's very difficult to find their eyes. Obviously, the animal eye autofocus isn't going to work that well, and you might just need to switch to single point. So instead of actually changing the focus mode, which is pressing a couple of buttons on your camera to actually change to a different focus point, just being able to hit that button next to the AF on button on the back and instantly have a single focus point, that is also a bit of a game changer for me. I really love having it set up like that. So I'm
Yeah.
interested.
I get
How is yours different
actually, I
from that?
guess I guess mine is that too. So I have the one button set up exactly how like my how I used to use back button. So I have my joystick set up so I can just move that focal point without having to press anything first. So I can just my joystick just moves it wherever I want it, which that's the other game changer of mirrorless is I can move that all the way over to the end if I want instead of just the
Ah,
1DX had quite a
yeah,
few focus points, but now the whole world's our oyster.
yeah.
So I have one set up as yeah, straight up like how I used to use back button focus and one set up on animal eye like automatic, like it will just like an auto animal eye. And so I do that sometimes, and if it's catching it, great, it's easy, done. But then if it's not, I just move to my back button how I want it. And the back button then, because I do a lot of back plates, so having that back button still is really helpful for me too. So I can take the photo and then just, know that I can just press that shutter again and it's not going to focus on anything.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, you want it to keep the thing that it last focused on. You don't want it to
Hmm.
refocus on the background. That's where that's really handy. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
I'm absolutely loving that. And the other thing that has totally revolutionized the way that I shoot is the flippy screen. So
Oh,
I refer
uh-huh.
to it as the flippy screen, but it's the articulated screen on the back of the camera that can flip out and rotate around and
I
things like
like
that.
flippy screen
Flippy
better.
screen. I think that's the best way. So, I mean, as pet photographers, we need to get down low. We need to get down to the dog's level, preferably lower,
Mhm.
camera right down on the ground. Prior to switching to mirrorless, I was just on the ground all the time. I was getting up, I was getting down, I was
Mhm.
crawling around. I spent most of my time on the ground. I found with this mirrorless, I am shooting pretty much probably about 80% of the time using the screen on the back. And what I'm doing is
Yeah.
holding the camera down onto the ground, but I'm not necessarily on the ground with it, which is
Mhm.
amazing because I can
Mhm.
walk along and basically just bend over and hold the camera on the ground, angle that flippy screen upwards so I can see exactly what the camera is seeing, and lineup
Yep.
shots even take the shot. Um,
Uh-huh.
it's just so it frees up so many different opportunities. You can be a lot faster. So instead of walking over to a spot, getting yourself down on the ground, getting in the position, holding the camera up to your face, you just walk on over
Yeah.
and put the camera on the ground, and that's it. It's ready to go. Now, I did find that took a little bit of adjustment because going from looking through the viewfinder and actually lining things up directly to
Uh-huh.
angling the camera to be the right angle while looking at the screen, that took practice to get right
Yep.
because
Agreed.
it's not something that is just intuitive. And I've never shot with a camera that had that type of screen before. I don't think, have you? You probably
Yep.
haven't either.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. I
So
yeah, it was
this
new
was
for me too, and it was definitely a learning curve to get used to that. And for a while, I'd like try it and I'd be like, "Just forget it. I'm gonna lay back
yeah,
down," because
yeah,
I couldn't get it to work exactly how I wanted it to.
yeah.
So it definitely takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it, man, that makes life so much easier. The one challenge though I do find, depending on the dog, is sometimes the dog wants to keep focus on your face. And so you need ways to get them to look down at the camera if it's not by your face.
That's the
But
biggest
it's
challenge for
a
sure.
yeah, it's a huge game changer for those dogs that are a little bit nervous by the camera, because you're able to, even if you keep it just below your face, like just in front of you a little bit, like they can still keep eye contact with you. And if you have it up towards your face, like it still looks like they're looking at the camera, even though you're able to keep that eye contact with them. So working with those little bit more nervous dogs has been a game changer too.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely work really hard to get eye contact with the camera. And I actually even find if I'm looking straight down on the camera, I'm not really making as much eye contact with the dogs. So they're actually
Mm.
searching for
Mhm.
something else to look for. So often
Mm.
it's actually
Mhm.
the owner's face, which kind of sometimes might mean that I need to work to get the focus off the owner's face, or you get them on the ground.
Yeah, you're like, "Hey, can you lay on the ground? I'm not going to anymore
Yeah,
because I
I'll
don't
just
have
stay
to,
here, but
but you should."
you just hop down on the ground and stick your face right next to my camera, please. Thank you. But yeah, if you're not looking,
That's where that's where a ball is very helpful.
yes, yeah.
Or
So
if a dog likes a ball or a treat or something.
yeah, something else to get their focus down onto, because it actually does make a big difference. Even if you're just crouching, holding the camera down, and they're still looking at your face.
Mhm.
In the picture, the dog is looking up. There's no eye
Yep,
contact
right.
being made at all with the camera. So that's probably the biggest challenge when working like that. I will say that you can get away with more the further away from the dog you are. So that line of
Yeah,
sight sort of
yep,
lines up a little bit better. So if you're shooting with a 200 mil lens at 200, it's not going to matter
yeah.
quite so much if the dog isn't looking directly at the camera. So you can get away with a little bit more.
I've actually found you can almost get too low now, like, for
Yeah.
action shots where then there's, like, too much blurred green grass and, like, the dog's lower legs are gone. I'm like,
Yep.
"Oh, man, I gotta get higher
Yeah, I
because I'm
know,
losing the dog's legs."
because it's so easy to get down so low. You just stick the camera on the ground and you're like,
Uh-huh.
"Okay, well, now the camera can't see."
Right, now I'm
So
just photographing grass.
yeah, it's no good at all. But yeah, I mean, that's even just being able to shoot in from a different angle that you would normally, like right next to a rock. Like I found that when we were
Right.
shooting in Spain recently at Barcelona, there were some really tight spots where I physically couldn't
Mhm.
have got my body and my head into the position that I needed to shoot from that
Right.
particular spot. But I could just kind of hold the camera there and just like look through the screen, and it was perfect. So it just opens
Yeah.
up so many more possibilities and it makes things quicker. Like that's, I'd say that would be my number one change in the way that I photograph after switching to mirrorless. I mean, it's not just a different type of camera, it actually enables you to photograph differently and better. I
Mhm.
feel it's better.
Right, right. Definitely more options, you know?
So
I
many
mean,
more.
because you have all the same options that you had with the DSLR, but now a whole entire, box Pandora's box of new options.
New little box of tricks to trawl through and get excited about. Well, if you me anyway. And of course, I read
Yep.
the manual from cover to cover as soon as I got it because that's just me. So I found all
I
these other
love it.
cool little things. So yeah.
That's a long manual. That's impressive.
Just a little bit of light bedtime reading.
I love it. I love it. So, what advice would you give for someone maybe that's kind of newer at this little, well, two things. Let's start here with established pet photographers who've been doing DSLR for a while, that they have a DSLR, they're still using DSLR. When would you recommend that they start to maybe consider upgrading to mirrorless?
So I wouldn't say that you immediately need to run out there and upgrade to mirrorless just because mirrorless cameras are the next biggest, latest thing. However, if you are considering getting a new camera for whatever reason, maybe you feel like you've outgrown the features, maybe you want higher resolution, maybe you want a better autofocus system, instead of looking at
Mhm.
the DSLR system, look at the mirrorless system instead. Because
Yep.
if you are in it for the long haul, if you think you're going to be doing this for a few years, I think it's important to go with where the technology is headed,
Mhm.
because you're going to be at the forefront of it. You're not going to be dealing with, in 5 years' time, you're not going to be dealing with really outdated technology that's just not being supported, not being upgraded anymore. So while you don't need to run out and buy the new latest mirrorless just because they're out there, when it is time to upgrade or when it is time to get a new camera, consider going mirrorless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to switch everything over at once
No,
because they do have an adapter that you can use. I'm pretty sure all the manufacturers do. I've
they
been
do.
using the
Yeah.
Canon adapter. I've just started switching over to the actual RF lenses. I've been using EF lenses for, I mean, a year and a half, almost 2 years now at this point,
Yeah. Wow.
um, with my camera. And they still work great. Actually, some of them
Work
work
better.
even better on my R5 than they did on my 1DX of the
Yeah.
EF lenses with the adapter, which I'm just like,
It's
how?
amazing. Yeah, so some lenses might be prone to front focusing or back focusing, and it's just you know the way that it works with the DSLRs. If you put that same lens on a mirrorless, it's not going to front focus or back focus. You're not going to have those issues because of the way the autofocus system works in the mirrorless cameras. So I
Right,
found with my 135 mil, my old EF 135, when I started using it on my new Canon R5, it was actually a better lens. It actually
right,
worked better on the mirrorless with the adapter. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I've stuck with the adapter for a little while. Then I got a bit annoyed with it, and then I just sort of sold all my EF lenses and went to RF. But you do not need to do that.
Yep. Yeah.
Whatever camera brand that you have, there will be an adapter where you can use your old lenses, and it can be something that you upgrade over time. It can be, oh, this
Hmm.
lens is getting a little bit old, it's not in such good condition anymore, I'm looking at upgrading. Oh well, I'll just upgrade to the mirrorless one, and you don't have to
Yep.
use the adapter anymore. So that's nice, but it's not essential.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, there's a couple lenses that like I love my 24 1.4 that I don't know that I will get rid of that until they have an RF one that is just as good.
Yeah, or
Because
an L
that's one of my
series
favorites.
probably. Actually, is
Yeah,
the
right.
one that you've got, is the 24 1.4, is that an L series EF?
Yeah, it is.
It
Yep.
is, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
the thing that, see, Canon are bringing out new lenses all the time for the RF system, and that's something they
Yep.
haven't brought out yet is L series wide angle primes. So there's no
Right.
L series prime. So
Mhm.
they've got a 24, they've got a 35. They're both f1.8, but they're just sort of standard lenses. I actually just recently bought the 24 because, well, kind of long story, but I sold my 28 to 70. I was going to buy a 24 to 70, and then I ended up getting sidetracked by the new bright, shiny 135. So I ended up just with the 24 RF 1.8, and it's actually a pretty good little lens. But when they start bringing out the they're slowly sort of replacing all of the old EF
Yeah.
lenses with the RF lenses. So there'll be, L series versions of them. And like lens technology is also going ahead leaps and bounds as well. I mean, the quality of
Mhm.
lenses is getting better as time goes on too. So it's not just the actual camera body technology that's upgrading, it's everything. So exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Mm.
All right, so that was great advice for people that are established. Would you give the same advice to somebody that maybe is buying their first, they're just kind of getting into this pet photography game and maybe they had like a consumer level camera that but it's time for their first professional gear. But maybe they're pinching some pennies trying to do this on a budget. Do you think it's worth investing in the mirrorless, or you can get better deals on some used DSLRs since so many people are selling their DSLR systems and moving to mirrorless?
Exactly.
What would you
Yeah,
do?
that second point, exactly. So because so many people are switching to mirrorless, you can actually get some pretty good DSLRs pretty cheap secondhand
Mhm.
these days. So if pet photography is something that you're just sort of starting out in, you're not 100% sure that you're going to be doing it for a long time, you don't have a big budget. That's the other thing. Like, this new mirrorless technology comes with a price tag. And it's
Right.
a quite a big price tag for the professional stuff anyway. So you can get pretty professional DSLR gear, like bodies and lenses,
Mhm.
really reasonably priced secondhand. So that could definitely be, think of it as just a stepping stone. Like in, five,
Yeah.
7 years' time, you might see yourself with, a nice flash mirrorless camera and nice new lenses. But to get to that point, you might just need to have a little stepping stone DSLR and maybe
Yeah,
some secondhand
because
lenses.
all that equipment's still great and will still
Oh, it's
make
fantastic.
beautiful professional grade lens or professional grade images.
Exactly, and you're probably, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
just in the first 6 months, 1 year of being a photographer, or just sort of doing it as a hobby or whatever, you're probably not going to reach the potential of the DSLR anyway in that time
Right.
frame. So you probably actually aren't going to be using the features, or aren't going to be using the mirrorless to its full potential anyway. So it's a lot to pay for something that you're not really using yet. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you have the budget for it, there's definitely, they've just brought out some crop sensor um, Canon mirrorless bodies. I think it's
Mm.
the R, what is
Mhm.
it, the R7 and
Yes, I think so. Yep.
10, R7 and the R10
Oh,
crop
I didn't hear about
sensor.
the R10.
Yeah, so both of those are also, they're not as expensive as the R5, R6, also the R3, which is like the flagship mirrorless at the
Right.
moment. So there's definitely, and that goes across all the different manufacturers as well. So generally, like Sony, Nikon, they will have their, flagship amazing one that all the professional
Right.
photographers want, and they are starting to fill in the product range with mirrorless, going all the way down to
Mm-hmm.
the very basic kind of entry level stuff too. So I mean, even just then at least you're in the same kind of system as you will be in the future if
Right.
you upgrade. So that's
Yeah,
another thing too.
true.
It really depends on budget. If budget's important,
Do
if you
you,
don't have much to spend, go
yeah.
second hand.
Do you have, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question. I don't.
Okay.
With those newer, like the R7s, I'm putting you on the spot. The
Yeah.
R7, the R10, is the focusing system similar to the R5, R6, or is it a different focus? That was always the big difference in the DSLRs from the consumer DSLR to say the higher level ones. The 1DX was a totally different focusing system, which for pet photography made a big difference.
That's a really good point, actually. And yeah, so as far as I know, the R7 and the R10 have the same focusing system, which
Yeah.
is,
I wonder if they
again,
have as many focus points or if, because I guess it doesn't matter because there aren't really the same focus points that there were in a DSLR.
I mean, it works on a completely different level of technology. So
Right.
the sensors, I think, are not quite as good or as large. Obviously, they're crop
Yeah.
sensors as well. So
Right.
they're obviously going to fall down a little bit there. But the actual autofocus system, I don't think it makes sense for them to make a focusing system that's not as good, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Like if they're already
Right.
making this, they've already got the technology, they're already making the focusing systems for the higher level ones. I think they're pretty
Right.
much just putting that in the lower ones as well. And it's other things in
Yeah.
the camera that's actually sort of bringing them down into that lower price point. So yeah, as
Right.
far as
Right.
I
Like it
know,
might not have the dynamic range, or I wonder if it's still what the frame rate could be
low
for
light
those
as
other ones.
well, like not as good low
Yeah.
light. That frame rate, that's actually what I was going to mention before too. So because you don't have a mirror in the camera clacking away inside, going up and down
Right.
every time you take an image, we're seeing a lot higher frames per second as well
Mhm.
because there's the mechanical shutter and then there's the electronic shutter as well. And the electronic shutters on these modern mirrorless professional cameras are insane, just insane.
Yeah.
So like 20 frames a second, something that was not even, and even up to 30, I think, with some of the Sonys, maybe with the latest
Wow.
R3. Um, and I mean, high frames per second, a high frame rate for us as pet photographers shooting action is just incredible.
Right. Yeah, what was the 1DX, like 14? And that was a lot.
14, and it sounded like a machine gun. It was
Yeah. It's boom,
insane.
boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
the other thing is it's silent. I mean, if you put it on the electronic shutter at 20 frames a second on my Canon R5, you can't even hear it shooting.
Right.
It's
Right.
almost like you're shooting video, but with really high resolution frames, individual frames. It's absolutely
Right?
incredible, and that's just going to get
Yeah.
better and better as time goes on too. So there was an issue called rolling shutter with the electronic shutter,
Mhm.
where you'd get a bit of distortion um, in the image because of the way that the shutter functions. But even that, they've designed it in a different way now, so that it's really minimizing that rolling shutter as well. So
Yeah.
that's, oh geez, sorry, that just like went back to like one of the things I love about mirrorless. So I got a bit off topic there.
No, it's all
good,
good. It's
good
all
info,
on
right?
topic. It was about mirrorless.
Yeah,
We're
true.
good. I love it. All right. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I have a feeling we might have convinced more than a handful of people to go
Yeah,
upgrade their equipment. I'm sorry, we should have put a disclaimer at the beginning of
yeah,
this episode that do not listen to this episode if you do not want to be tempted to upgrade gear.
yeah, pretty much. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. I will just say that, like, if you're happy with your gear, there's absolutely no reason you need to go out and buy all the latest and greatest stuff.
Yeah.
And you can get really good gear secondhand. That's not necessarily
Mhm.
mirrorless, but still probably a massive upgrade if you're shooting with like a more, consumer level kind of camera.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you don't have to
Absolutely.
go out and spend all the money.
Yeah, for sure. And one more question as we sum this up for people
Yeah.
that again are towards the beginning of their journey and they're like, "Oh man, I really want to like use some piece of gear to upgrade the look of my images." Do they invest in a lens on a lower level body or do they upgrade the body before the lens? What came first? The chicken or
That's
the
that
egg?
chicken and egg thing. Hey, like it's It's the age-old question, and it's one of those things where you really need more information before you can recommend something. So
Yeah.
if you find that you really love shooting action, but your camera is just doesn't have very high frames a second, or the autofocus system is not very reliable, and that's the number one thing that you want to improve, a new camera body is probably going to be the
Hmm.
best option. It also might be the lens in that case too, because some older lenses just don't have like
Right.
the motors in them. They just cannot keep up with refocusing. They can't actually keep up with the autofocus system of the camera. Therefore, it might be the lens that needs to be upgraded in that exact same sort of outcome, wished for outcome.
Yeah.
So it's really, you have to really look at what sort of images you want to create, where you're being held back. So is it low light? Is it the fact that
Hmm.
you're not getting those smooth, dreamy backgrounds? Then possibly you
Hmm.
need a prime lens, or you need to upgrade your lens so you can shoot at a shallower depth of field. It's like, what do you want to achieve? Because only by knowing that will you know what is best to upgrade. So I'm sorry, there's no answer. There's no
No,
one size fits
that's
all
good.
answer to that question.
The answer is to come ask us inside
Yes.
Hair of the Dog Academy or Unleashed Education.
Yep, yep, and we'll be able to help you out individually
Yes.
on an individual basis. Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, Charlotte. This has been such a great conversation. Absolutely love it. If people want to hear more from you, you are a regular guest instructor in the Academy with your critique corner where people can submit images of theirs and you can give them feedback and help them take it up to another level. And they can also find you at Unleashed Education. So tell them where they can find you on the interwebs as well.
Okay, cool. So, Unleash Education, I run that with Craig Turner Bullock. He's a New Zealand photographer. And you can find us at unleashed.education. That is the URL for that. And then we're also obviously on Facebook, Instagram. So if you wanted to search for Unleashed Education, you will find us there.
Perfect. And if you guys want to come photograph dogs in Iceland with us in June 2024
Woo!
with myself, Charlotte, Craig, and Kaylee Greer from Dog Breath Photography, go to petphotographyretreats.com, pop your name on that wait list because we have a bark adventure coming up
It's
and it's going to
going
be
to be incredible.
ridiculous.
Yep. I cannot
I
wait.
love it. Oh, so fun. All right, awesome. Charlotte, it was so good to chat with you and all of you guys. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.